Welcome to a Friday edition of the First Things First podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Wolfe. Catch us Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern on FS1. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and tell us what you think. Leave us a review. Time to bring in Nick and the Hall of Famer, Cris Carter. Giants got some good news regarding Odell Beckham. Their star receiver returned to practice yesterday for the first time since injuring his ankle in the preseason. Reportedly, the Giants are optimistic Beckham will play Monday night versus the Lions. Odell would have liked to be on the field week 1, but looking back, he realizes it wasn't very likely.
Honestly, I don't really know how realistic it was. As bad as I wanted to play, it just wasn't there. It had been, 3 weeks after the injury. It hasn't even been a month since it happened. And, this is a 6 to 8 week thing. Unfortunately, as much as I was trying my hardest to get out there, it just wasn't enough time. It's probably the best I felt yet, so we're going in the right direction.
Okay, guys, it sounds positive. It sounds like he wants to play, but he knows why he couldn't play. Can the Giants beat the Lions if he doesn't play?
They can beat the Lions if he does not play, but he's going to play. And like I talked about last week, as far as practice, Nick is starting to understand slightly. He still doesn't believe that I'm correct in the matter. Practice is very, very important. And him being out there on a Thursday, now this is a different Thursday than it would be, because in NFL schedule, when you play on Monday, the coaches move the schedule back. So your typically off day would be a Tuesday. They move it to Wednesday. So your hardest days, when you play a Monday night game, they're on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now, the Wednesday practice is not that important. The Thursday practice is paramount because they're starting to put the game plan in. And this is the first time the Giants could look at him, see him running, and be like, you know something? We could put a scheme in because we think he's going to be there. He couldn't play in the Dallas game. He tried to. He didn't get medical clearance. But if you left it up to him, if it had been a playoff game, he would have played in it. So he's right. It is a 6 to 8 week injury. I didn't want to say it before, but he let the cat out the bag. He had a high ankle sprain. I've been knowing that the whole time. I just didn't want to say it. The Giants didn't want people to know. And that's what prolonged the ankle injury compared to some other ankle injuries. But they have to have him on the field. This offense is not an explosive offense, even though they have a few nice little pieces. That offensive line, their inability for them to block Eli's inability to be consistent, and those things are magnified if Odell is not there.
But he's playing Monday.
Yes, he's absolutely playing on Monday.
You told us a week ago or a week and a half ago on the first day of the show, Thursday's the practice to look for week 1. Didn't practice in week 1. He was at limited participant yesterday. You've talked to him. You expect him to play on Monday. And it is a damn good thing he's going to play on Monday, because I remember Mark Schlereth, I think, told me, listen, players, we don't look ahead to the schedule. Our season's always 1 week long, and it's just the guy in front of you. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. But the coaches, GMs, guys that are looking maybe from a more 10,000-foot view, they do look at the schedule. And you know what the Giants have after this home game respite against the Lions? They're in Philly. They're in Tampa. They started the season in Dallas. We knew going into the season the Giants were going to be betting underdogs in 3 of their first 4 games. Doesn't mean you can't win them, but Vegas is going to say you are unlikely to win 3 of your first 4. The one game where they would be favorites, home against Detroit. You can't have Odell not be in this game, because if he were to not play in this game, you have no offense in this game. And while I think Detroit's a flawed team, Detroit can score some points.
Yes.
Even on the New York Giants, they can score some points. You need Odell to just be able to give your offense enough of a heartbeat to where you can score enough points to win this game. And we've talked about how if you fall to 0-2, 88% of the time you don't make the playoffs. The Giants, if they were to not win Monday night, forget 0-2. They'd be looking at potentially 0-3, 1-3, 0-4, and then your season is gone. So it's critical he plays.
But, Nick, you said they need Odell to at least give this offense a heartbeat. They need a lot more than just a heartbeat from Odell to beat this Lions team. Do you worry at all that you know he's not 100%? He knows he's not 100%. So we shouldn't expect him to have an Odell Beckham last year type of game in this game. Do you worry that you're rushing him back a little too soon because you're going to probably give him more than he can or should handle, and you know he's going to want it? Is that a concern at all in rushing him back?
It's not a concern because I see the way he's moving. In his lateral movement, which is more important for a wide receiver, especially getting off the bump and run, which you have to play bump and run with a safety help over the top against Odell because he's such a great route runner and he has such a high football IQ that he will pick you apart if you just try to play zone and play off of him. I remember when I had this injury. I tried to play week number 1 with it. I wasn't very, very effective. But after that, I remember we came to New York and played the Giants. And I had 100 yards in the first half.
But did you...
In the 3rd week of the ankle injury. So he's done everything. He's got a great staff around him. Not only the Giants staff, but the staff that he personally has hired to be able to train him, to be able to take care of him. He's spent 24 hours around the clock trying to get this ankle work. I expect big things out of Odell.
And Jenna, so a few things. One, that it is a 6 to 8 week injury, but that is the time frame until you're as close to full strength as you will get. It is not an injury where you are out 6 to 8 weeks. With Thomas Rawls, suffered a high ankle sprain this preseason around the same time as Odell. He is expected to play this week. You mentioned if it were a playoff game. We saw a wide receiver. We want to go position for position. Jeremy Maclin suffer a high ankle sprain in a wild card game for the Chiefs and play the following week. So that's not smart, but in the playoffs, you're not worried about the long-term rest of your season.
Right.
So it is something that, not like a broken leg. You can't fight through it. You can fight through this. What would have been silly or potentially long-term damaging would have been if he would have played week 1. It's why Cris was on the phone with him saying, calm down. It's a long season. You don't need to play week 1. But the other thing you said, Jenna, was in order to beat the Lions. I do not believe the Lions are some great team. I think last year they got by on smoke and mirrors, comebacks against bad teams. Week 1, people are impressed with what they did against Arizona. We might find out Arizona, especially offensively, is one of the most limited teams in football. I think you're going to see see the Lions, as you did many times last season. When they're up against a really good defense, Matt Stafford becomes a much more limited quarterback. So I don't think the Lions are going to go out there and score 35 points on the Giants. The problem is, if you don't have Odell, you might not score 10 points.
I mean, they don't have to score points. I mean, how long has it been since the Giants have scored 24 points with their offense?
It's been 7 straight games they have not scored at least 20 points. Forget 24. They haven't scored at least 20 against a playoff team since week 1 of last season. Their method has been simple. Suffocating defense, huge plays from Odell Beckham. They had the suffocating defense against Dallas.
Yes.
What they didn't have was the huge plays from Odell Beckham.
I just want to go back to something you said earlier that I practically tackled you to interrupt you for, in which case you kept steamrolling, which was good. It was very TV-ish of you. You said you came back after you hurt yourself. Your first game, you were not effective, and then the second, third, and fourth. Do you regret playing in that first game? If you could do it over again, would you have waited that first game and come back strong the second game and not have had an ineffective game?
Well, I regret it a little bit because eventually it became more of a nagging injury, and I did have to have it cleaned out a couple years later on, and that's what ends up happening because it's a weird injury. So you might get a bone spur if you play with the injury in the front. I've made that point to Odell, and he understands that. But at that time, I think I had a streak of 180-something games in a row.
There we go.
So I had to run on out there to keep that thing going.
Okay, so
but I really thought that I could play, and I was totally against getting any type of injection. As a wide receiver, it's hard to play with an injection to your ankle. And Odell was totally against, not that the Giants recommended it, but he was not trying to take anything, any shot or any medication to take away the pain, but he could really injure himself in week
Just getting back to my point, do you want him in the lineup if he is going to maybe be ineffective, maybe have, what did you have, a bone spur, stress fracture, whatever it is. I mean, these are things that could happen if you don't come back.
Listen,
that
100 yards against the Giants, though, the bone spur, I'll get over that.
And here's the thing.
But will he get over that?
No, but here's the thing, Jenna. That we know he might be ineffective, he might not be. We know the Giants will be ineffective without him. And as far as long-term, a year later having to have an ankle procedure, I mean, it's pro football. None of these guys leave the league okay.
Yeah, you saw my ankles on the basketball court. They're all right.
I mean, I suppose. But like Cris, like I've played basketball with Cris. I've been in locker rooms with Cris. Looks like a guy that got beat up because he got beat up for a living. All these guys get beat up for a living. Right. It's part of the deal.
So the Cowboys are taking on the Broncos this weekend. Cowboys wide receiver Dez Bryant only had 2 catches in Week 1 versus the Giants and faces a pair of formidable Bronco cornerbacks in Chris Harris Jr. and Aqib Talib. Nick, how much pressure is Dez Bryant under versus Denver?
I mean, a lot of pressure if he wants to be considered what he once was considered, which is obviously one of the 5 best receivers in the league. Just a couple years ago, someone said, who are the best receivers in football? It would be hard to get someone to say, people would argue about number 1, but these were the names: Julio Jones, Odell Beckham, Antonio Brown, A.J. Green, Dez Bryant. And people argued about the order of those 5 names. If you ask people right now, who are the 10 best receivers in football? People are not naming Dez.
He's right on the fringe.
He has gone from a guy who was in the argument for 1 or 2 and clearly top 5 to a guy who is now considered, like, would you rather have Dez Bryant or Jordy Nelson? I don't know. Would you rather have, I think DeAndre Hopkins is better than, like, go down, Julian Edelman? I'm not sure. That's insane for a guy of his physical talents, and it's insane for a guy who has reached the peaks he reached. Years 3, 4, 5 CC of his career, he averages 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns. It's his averages. Since then, in the 2 seasons plus a game since then, he has not reached those averages cumulatively. I don't know what the story is. I don't know what's happened. I don't know why he hasn't, gotten better. I don't know why he hasn't maintained, but it's a puzzling one for me.
Well, the number one thing that's happened in Dallas is they have more talent around them. As far as they throw the ball to Cole Beasley, Jason Witten still needs a couple catches, Terrence Williams, he still gets the ball, and that guy back there, number 21, he's going to carry the ball, touch the ball at least 20 to 25 times a game. So people might point to, well, his injuries are starting to compile that maybe he lost a step. Well, when you run 4.5, when you come into the league, a lot like I did, I ran into upper 4.5s. Dez is probably a little bit faster than I was. You can afford to lose a step because you're not getting open based on your speed. The biggest difference between Dez and a player like myself, Dez is right now, we don't know where he is. Is he leveling off? Is he declining? Or is there still a couple floors in the building that he can go to? I believe that there is, because I believe that adding some variety, you need to move Dez Bryant around. You cannot line him up in one spot. They put Jackrabbit. New Orleans.
Janoris Jenkins.
Yes. The Giants' best corner who shut Dez down last year. When you have that type of matchup, you cannot line a guy up in one spot and just say, physically, I want you to be better than this guy. So offensively, the Cowboys, they have to help Dez out. Now, Dez, he's got to be able to open up his mind to be able to learn a different route tree. There's 2 different route trees. There's one for the slot receivers, and there's one for the outside receivers. Dez has been predominantly an outside receiver. And the reason why I believe his game can grow was because in year number 8 for me, Nick, I made my first Pro Bowl. Now, after that, I went to 7 more Pro Bowls after that. So it would be impossible for me to believe Dez has hit the ceiling as far as his growth. He's doing everything he can off the field. He takes great care of his body. He's getting the right amount of rest and sleep. He's not hanging out doing a lot of the silly, immature things he was doing before. But Dallas and Dez have to come together, and they have to be able to do some things different because the NFL, they have the book on Dez Bryant. And that book is he's only going to run 3 or 4 routes. Now, I believe that Dez is a better player than that. I thought that he would be in that top 5 for 5 to 8 years, and he hasn't been, but I still believe that Dez Bryant is still one of the elite wide receivers in the game.
So you say, CC, that Dallas and Dez need to come together to figure this out. Is it Dallas and Dez, or is it Dak and Dez? And how much stock should be placed in that relationship between the quarterback and the receiver? And when they're not on the same page, sometimes the receiver does not stay on the same page.
Well, Dak and Dez are on the same page. He was targeted the number of times you want to target your number 1 guy.
He was targeted more than anybody else on the team.
Yes, but he didn't get open. I mean, that's not Dak's fault. That's not chemistry. That's, I'm better than you. He wasn't better than Jackrabbit. So if he's not better physically, you have to build a trick to defense. Give the defense a different look. Line him up somewhere where they haven't seen him. Run him on a route that they don't have you booked on. Those are the things I'm talking about as far as coming together. Dak, there is no problem with Dak. All right?
So change the whole offense around to make it better for him?
Just add a little flavor.
It's what every team does with their best receiver. That's the thing. Like, once the show's over, 9:30 Eastern America, go on YouTube and look up highlights of Odell, Julio, Antonio Brown. Guess what you'll see? Some of those highlights come from the slot. Some come from the left, some come from the right.
Yes.
So that is what you do with your best players. Cris has told me as soon as Randy got to Minnesota, you started teaching him your stuff.
Yes.
That way you guys could signal to each other, I'll be you and you'll be me, but we've got to know what the other guy's responsibilities are.
And because the coaches had so much confidence in Randy's mental makeup and his football IQ. Randy proved to them in the meetings and on the field, there's nothing that I can't learn. So the coaches used to call a play, and it might be designed for me to get the ball. If Randy was hot at that time, Randy and I had the ability under Brian Billick's system that we could switch. And Randy would be in my spot. We call it chasing the ball. We call it getting the ball to the hot player. And Randy and I had that flexibility. I never played with any other player who had that ability or football IQ. And that was one of the things that made Randy special. But the system, like I told you from yesterday, the system they put us in allowed that flexibility. Now, Scott Lanahan is one of the great coordinators in Dallas, great play caller. But you're subject to the mental makeup of the wide receivers. If they can't do it, as a coordinator, Scott can't do it. And also, they run the ball pretty good.
Well, and that's the other point here. It's not as if Dez is he's as productive as he can be given his targets. They're just running the ball, and his numbers are dropping despite the fact that they are still focusing on him. He's still getting the targets. The issue is not lack of opportunity for Dez Bryant right now. The issue is lack of him executing upon being given that opportunity.
You know, if you look at last year's playoff game, when Dallas was in trouble, Dez Bryant brought them back.
Yep.
To me, that player is still there. You have to help the player. Put him in different situations where he can utilize his ability. Dez Bryant is just not a jump ball 50-50. Run down the sideline, in bump and run, throw the ball up, 50-50 ball. Dez Bryant. At this stage of his career, there has to be more substance to what he can do with his brain compared to his physical ability. Mark Schlereth sat right here and said, the great players, as they get older in the league, they play more from the neck up than they do from the neck down. And that's what we're seeing in Dallas, and that's my expectation of Dez. I believe that Dez is still elite, and I believe we're going to see that throughout the season.
We're joined by Fox NFL analyst Eric Mangini. Coach, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good to be back. I missed you.
Coach, in your honor, we have it #Spicy Friday.
Spicy Friday?
Yeah, but not over this way. Right towards him. Your comments, spicy, right at
Every
Nick.
Friday with me is
Let me
spicy.
interpret for you.
There you go.
I don't need a hashtag.
The New England Patriots take on the Saints on Sunday. Both teams searching for their first win of the season. Pats looking to avoid their first 0-2 start since 2001. That's bad. The Saints, on the other hand, have lost their first 2 games each of the last 3 years. That's normal. Coach, should the Patriots be worried about Tom Brady or the defense against the Saints? Which one?
The defense is going to be something that it's difficult to play in New Orleans. Okay, it's difficult playing against Sean Payton's offense. It's shifts, it's motions, it's multiple personnel groups, it's gadget formations, it's multiples of multiples. So they're going to have to simplify. They're going to have to simplify anyways based off last week's performance. But then to go in and have to deal with this much stuff, they're going to have to take a step back to try to slow them down. And even with that, it's really, really difficult to slow this offense down.
Coach, when you talk about step back,
yep.
are you talking about the amount of information that you're presenting to the players in preparation? Are you talking about the amount of things that you would do? Say if we had 5 staple defenses going into this game or 5 staple coverages, are we limiting those coverage based on we don't know what we have in New England yet?
Well, it's a little bit we don't know what we have in New England, and then it's also dealing with New Orleans offense. So if you try to match that, if you try to match and take away certain guys and do specific game plan things, Sean's going to give you formations that you haven't seen. He's going to motion in and out of bunch and stacked receivers. It's going to be 5 wide receivers, and then it's going to be 3 tight. It's just never ending. So you can overwhelm the guys going into a game like that where everybody's chasing the last play, and you don't want to do that. You want to settle them down, have something easy. Now, that being said, if Drew Brees knows what you're in trouble as well. So you better disguise whatever you're in, and you've got to simplify it too. It's hard. It's really hard.
I'm probably viewed maybe unfairly as like the resident Patriots skeptic because I didn't pick them to go to the Super Bowl.
I don't think there's anything unfair.
Well, because I had the audacity to say the Steelers might be better. And I had the audacity after week 1 to say, well, I mean, they were not good in many facets of the game. Maybe it means something. I think the Patriots will win this game. I would be shocked if New Orleans wins this game. If the Patriots win and the defense struggles, man, that's the Saints in New Orleans. That's what you're talking about. Like you can,
yes.
If they win this game 35-31,
that's a legitimate
That's
excuse.
not going to concern. My level of concern about the defense will not be raised. New Orleans at home. New Orleans, by the way, this is their only home game until week 6. Like they recognize the importance of this game, how much better they are in New Orleans on offense. If the Patriots win this game, but Tom Brady isn't sharp against that defense, a defense that has been bottom 2 in the league 4 of the last 5 years and sure looked like they were going to continue that trend in week 1 against the Vikings, that's when I think more people start being concerned about Tom Brady. There would be no reason for the Patriots offense to struggle in New Orleans in week 2.
Well, I don't think that's totally fair. The defense in New Orleans, they put a lot of money into the defense. They've done a lot of things to try to improve the defense. So we don't know if this year's defense is going to be the same as the last 2 years' defense.
We did see Sam Bradford have the single greatest game since he was at Oklahoma.
Look,
against this defense.
and there's a lot of things that happen in game 1 that you'd love to say, oh, my God, this is exactly how the rest of the 15 games are going to go. But it's not always realistic. We're going to learn more over the next few weeks. And I think it's the same thing defensively with New Orleans. How much have they really made progress versus how much are they the same system we've seen or the same product we've seen?
What makes the Patriots, I think, so intimidating, or what has done that in the last couple of years, is how good number 12 is. He usually doesn't make mistakes. He's flawless when he goes out there. He knows how to win games, even when they're losing. If he plays poorly in this game, does it change the mindset of other teams coming in that, hey, now 2 teams have gotten to him? Maybe this isn't such a tough roadblock after all.
Well, I would caution anybody that walks in to play Tom Brady of underestimating him.
Yes.
Because he will light you up. He'll hang 40 on you, and you'll think, oh, my God, this guy is 40, and then he'll hang 40 on you. Because that's who he is.
And then he'll run a 4.240.
Yeah, well,
5.2, 6.2.
Yeah, the 40
is not his strength.
Yeah, that's not going to be.
He's going to do all those other great things. Why not?
Right. One thing, though, it's one thing to go against a Kansas City defense. And you have to, as a fan, you have to realize Kansas City has great personnel, all right? They have a great secondary, not a good one. They got a great secondary. They have very good linebackers. They have a great defensive line. They got a great defensive coordinator who has had some success going against New England. So in New Orleans, they don't have that. They're secondary. New England will exploit their secondary. New England has better wide receivers than Minnesota does. All right? New England's ability, can they run the ball like Minnesota did with Dalvin Cook? Because that will allow Tom, because they got to take some of the pressure off of Tom. And that's what you're able to do with a running game. But I've seen this. If you slight Tom Brady, if you try to play 40 snaps of man-to-man, he will definitely throw for 350 yards, and they will score 40 points on the Saints. I expect this game to be a blowout. Watch Tom Brady correct, especially when he had time in the pocket. He will correct that, and he will be a lot more accurate with the football than he was in week number 1.
We're all, I would imagine, going to pick the Patriots to win this game. That obviously doesn't mean they will win this game. We talked yesterday about teams that go 0-2. 88% of them miss the playoffs. There's a more interesting, if you kind of do a dive on that when it comes to the Patriots, because their goal is not to make the playoffs. Like, making the playoffs is a given for New England with Tom Brady. They missed the playoffs after they won their first Super Bowl, and they missed the playoffs the year. What, you're mad at me for saying it's a given with Tom Brady?
This is the thing.
They make it every year.
But slow down. This is what Coach's face said. Coach's face said. Well, first of all, they don't think they're going to make the playoffs.
Yes, they do.
They don't.
They're not going to tell anybody.
You do. No, they don't. They do not think that way. They don't think that.
They think they're going to miss the playoffs?
They're not thinking about it. What they're trying to do is play.
Well, let's ask.
Well, they're not,
okay, what do I know?
No,
okay?
I'm just saying.
I have to say, they're not sitting around a staff meeting going, "Whew, look, if we go 0-2,
no,
88% of the times we're not going to make the." All they care, and I must not.
So have respect to the system. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, I'm not doing a good job articulating how dedicated and committed they are to the game by game, moment by moment, meeting by minute meeting philosophy.
I believe
that's real.
I believe that, but that's because that is the way the Patriots assess things. Doesn't mean football fans across America can't look at historical trends and say, what does this mean for the future? So the point that I'm
trying, address it to the fans. Don't address it to the Patriots, because the Patriots don't think that way.
With respect, I don't think the Patriots are watching.
Man,
so I'm talking to you, America.
No, Mr. Kraft. Mr. Kraft is a friend of mine. He's watching.
It's on right now in every office.
Let me make the point that I was trying to make.
All meetings on hold for this show.
It is. Even if the Patriots were to lose to the Saints, I am not worried about them falling into that 88%. I still think they will make the playoffs. But the Patriots' goal, even if I'm the only one that thinks it, is to win the Super Bowl. 3 teams
That's
ever.
every team's goal.
Well, hold up. Wait, whoa. So I just want to make sure I understand. They're not thinking about the playoffs, but they are thinking about goals. Okay, got it. But let me just get this number out there.
It's universal. You go into the season with the goal of winning the Super Bowl. It's not like, hey guys, we get to the playoffs, we'll high five.
To win the Super Bowl.
Do we want to win a sports Emmy? Do you want to win a sports Emmy?
I mean, I just want to get the Hall of Fame first. Can I give my stat, damn it? The point that I'm trying to make is this, is teams that start 0-2, 3 of them have won the Super Bowl. The 93 Cowboys, why'd they start 0-2, CC? What was different in 93?
Emmitt Smith.
The best player maybe in the league, certainly their best player, held out. Mm-hmm. The 0-1 Pats started 0-2. What was different after the first 2 games?
Quarterback change.
Tom Brady became the quarterback in game 2. And the 07 Giants, which is still to this day considered one of the most amazing Super Bowl teams ever because they beat the undefeated Patriots. The point is, there is not a precedent for teams starting 0-2 without an amazing influx of talent. Tom Brady, Emmitt Smith, or a one-off, once-in-a-lifetime team like the Giants winning the Super Bowl. That's why this game is critical for them. We all think they're going to win it, and evidently the Patriots won't care. It'll just be the next week, and we're not worried about anything long-term. But I think the audience should know that is the historical precedent of where we're at.
I think you should take the day off and give yourself a raise.
Okay,
after getting that one in.
Thank you very much.
Hashtag Spicy Friday.
Spicy Friday. Yes. Coach Eric Mangini back with us. The Falcons open their brand new stadium Sunday night in an NFC Championship rematch. Last season in that game, the Falcons jumped out to a 24-0 lead en route to a 44-21 win. Aaron Rodgers was asked if there was a revenge factor heading into Sunday.
I mean, it's past. They won the game. They went to the Super Bowl. So you can't rewrite history. It's just, 2 1-0 teams who both feel like we can, be there in the end of the season. These are kind of games like last week that, you win these games, you feel better in December and January when you're coming down to filling out that 12-team bracket. No, it's going to be great. It's too bad Chick-fil-A is not open, but it's going to be exciting.
Before we dive in, you want to give the Chick-fil-A reference?
They put Chick-fil-A is an Atlanta staple. Chick-fil-A is one of the few companies left in America that just has decided we will never be open on Sundays. They put a Chick-fil-A in the new Falcons Stadium. Pro football games are played on Sunday, and Chick-fil-A is not changing its policy. So they have a Chick-fil-A concession that will not be open for this game. It'll be open for college games.
But never.
I'm just going to go on the limb and say it's Sunday in Atlanta. There will be some chicken being fried in Atlanta somewhere.
Maybe not in the stadium.
Yes.
Coach, who's got more on the line in this game, the Packers or the Falcons?
The most interesting thing to me about this game, from Atlanta's perspective, is that there's two new coordinators. So the offensive coordinator is new. The defense coordinator, even though he was on the staff, he's new. The team's coming off Super Bowl. They struggle to see Dan Quinn navigate through all of this and to see how Atlanta not only deals with last year, but how they deal with the amount of transition that they had. That's what I'm looking at. And then from a Green Bay's perspective, defensively, they've committed a ton of resources to this defense. Draft picks, I think the first 4 this year. They've got 5 number 1s on defense. I want to see that evolution. And I really like the pickup late of Quentin Dial and Ahmad Brooks. I think those two guys are going to help sub in and support this defense. So that's what I'm looking at from their perspective.
Green Bay has so much to gain by winning this game and by showing everybody our defense, the resources we've allocated have been well allocated. They were down, as Jenna mentioned, 24-0 in the first half of the NFC Championship game. I think 31-0 at the beginning of the second half against Atlanta. If they just shut down Seattle, I think Seattle's got not a great offense, but I think Seattle's got a good offense. I think Russell Wilson's an excellent player. Doug Baldwin's a good wide receiver. They shut them down. I came into this season believing Aaron Rodgers is the best player in the world, the best quarterback in the world, but that defense is not going to be good enough to win 3 consecutive playoff games or 4 consecutive playoff games as you need to win the Super Bowl. If Green Bay wins this game, they will almost by definition have slowed down Atlanta's offense more than they did in the NFC Championship game, and they will already have the head-to-head tiebreaker when it comes to home field advantage against the Seahawks and against the Falcons. And even if the teams aren't looking ahead like that, I'm looking ahead and saying that's going to matter. So I think Green Bay has enormous amounts of
You're like a lighthouse. You're guiding us all.
No, exactly. That's
Nick, it does matter. It's very important. But what's more important is the overall continuity of what Atlanta is doing. It's the big home opener. There's a lot of stuff going on, outside noise, as New England calls it, and I've learned from Coach. It's not distractions, it's just noise. But what kind of team are they going to be? I mean, because I've been on some very, very explosive offensive teams. In the mid-'90s, we got Warren Moon. Him and I went on to break NFL records. We scored a bunch of points.
244 catches.
Tom Moore was the offensive coordinator. Tom Moore went on to go somewhere else. After that, the offense struggled. So guys in the locker room, we knew that even though it was the same personnel, man, what are we doing? What's our identity? Then came Brian Billick. Man, we had one of the greatest offense in NFL at that time. Most points a game. And then Brian goes to Baltimore. We get another coordinator. We struggled that next year. We had Randy Moss, myself, Robert Smith, 3 all-pro offensive linemen. Internally, we began to question, man, does that guy know what he's doing? I mean, because we put up points, like we know how to do this. Is he really putting us in the right position? Cris, man, are you playing in the slot? Should you be playing outside a little more now? So what Atlanta is going through offensively and defensively, it's real. A lot of fans and stuff won't look at it, but Dan Quinn, I believe, is one of the great young coaches in the NFL. How he decides to manage that and how he gets through this transition time, it's very, very important. But it's more important that offense looks good. Why? Not only for the players and their confidence, because their defense, we know they're going to give up some points. We know they're undersized. We know they want to create turnovers. But that defense is a defense that plays better when they're playing with a lead than they are coming from behind.
And when you look, when you insert a new human being into the mix, even if the playbook doesn't change at all, the play calling changes, the approach changes, the meetings change, and that's an adjustment. It's an adjustment from a coaching staff perspective, and it's an adjustment for the players. And there is a legitimacy factor. Coming off the offensive performance that they had, the new coordinator's got to prove that he can give them those same tools. And at the flip side, defensively, how much can they improve with the new coordinator?
And piggybacking off what you said, you don't want to be labeled as having a Super Bowl hangover, right? To have gone that far and to have done what you did and to beat the Packers like you did last year and all this, and then to start the year 0-2, I think psychologically it's also a big thorn in your side trying to get through the rest of the season. Does that weigh on the team at all, Chris?
It does. I've never lost a Super Bowl. I've lost 2 NFC championships, and it was horrible. I've had good friends who have lost in the Super Bowl, and they told me, Chris, that cry that you had that night, you think that's bad? You go on 2 weeks later and you lose a Super Bowl. So losing the biggest game that you will ever play in the style for which you lose, we have seen through history. It has some type of effect. Now, how Atlanta deals with it, because I love Dan Quinn, how him and Matty Ice, they addressed it this offseason. They've looked at the game. They went over all the mistakes. They realized they could have made a few adjustments. They're not making excuses, but they did address the elephant in the room. Wow, we should have won that Super Bowl. So I believe that they've gone about it the right way, but it's monumental, and only those who have been through that know the gut-wrenching experience that it is.
I want to ask you a question real quick, because you, in the last segment, you were talking about one of the things that makes New England special is their ability to focus on the here and now, something I wasn't recognizing. They are in the moment. I think it's fair to say not every team can do that, right? That's one of the reasons the Patriots are the Patriots.
Yeah, it's really hard to do.
Okay, so if you're the Falcons and in the NFC Championship game, you beat the brakes off Green Bay, then you had the Super Bowl meltdown, whatever it is, you're up 28-3, as Chris was talking about. In week 1, you don't play that great. I know you got out with a win, but Mike Glennon is on your goal line with 2 passes fluttering into the end zone to beat you. You know that happened. If a Green Bay team that you then just beat 3 games ago for you comes in your building and beats you, for teams that aren't New England, do they start questioning? Do they start saying, what's happened to us? Why are we not the same?
Well, after we won the first Super Bowl in New England, the next year, things were really difficult. And we ended up missing the playoffs because we didn't deal very well with success. We didn't understand how teams were going to change in terms of the way that they approach us. And it's the same thing whether you win or whether you lose. The locker room, everybody thinks I was the reason. Not everybody, but there's a ego that you have to deal with that you didn't have to deal with the year before, and then you add the transition and all those things. It's going to be challenging. This is uncharted waters for Dan Quinn and for that locker room. It's going to be really hard for them to figure it out and figure out what they have to do to be as good as they were last year.
Finally, the Texans won a super exciting Thursday night contest last night versus the Bengals. And by exciting, I mean not so much. Making his first ever start, Deshaun Watson went 15-24 for 125 yards and ran for a 49-yard touchdown. CC, what were your thoughts on Watson?
My thoughts were the same thing I said before the game. If you have a questionable offensive line, forget about Savage. Forget about his agent, what they're talking about. Put someone in there who can make plays with their legs. Also, he's going to be the face of the franchise for years to come. So what was the difference in this game? It wasn't game planning. It was Deshaun Watson's ability to be an athlete and make some plays with his legs after getting smoked by Geno Ack. I mean,
man, I'm glad you mentioned it.
And most quarterbacks, young ones, they don't recover from that.
If you didn't see the game, it wasn't the most impressive part wasn't the touchdown run. It was what Chris mentioned. It was what immediately preceded the touchdown run. Deshaun Watson made a rookie mistake, held on to the ball too long, was backpedaling, and Geno Atkins, who might be the fastest 300-pound man in America, came rumbling, bumbling.
Let me tell you something you don't know. I coached Geno Atkins in high school also.
Really?
He was on that team.
Okay. Well, I believe Chris, the high school Chris coached has like 11 pros. Not the point. Geno Atkins came free. It was a stunt, a delay. He waits. The Texans' offensive line is totally confused. The Bengals' most dangerous defensive player comes totally free and obliterates.
I mean, he ran through him.
Ran through Deshaun Watson. On the next play, Deshaun Watson scored the game's only touchdown. the most important play of the game. It was wildly impressive to see that type of poise.
So nice to know that Houston now has their 16th quarterback in the last 8 minutes.
Yeah.
My question to you, Nick, is could the Texans have won this game with Tom Savage at the helm?
No. Well, the thing is this, it would have just been a field goal battle. It would have just been field goal. I don't think they could have. They needed his elusiveness, not just on that play, but on avoiding some other sacks. But remember what I said was one of my favorite things about week 1, that we see games and we don't know which team it's telling us more about. The Chiefs-Pats game we talked so much about, is that telling us the Pats could be in trouble or the Chiefs are awesome? Baltimore, Cincinnati, week 1. Everyone took that as a testimonial. The Ravens defense is back to what it used to be. This Ravens team could be really dangerous. Might just be Cincinnati is trash, and that Andy Dalton has gone back to the full-on Andy Dalton regression from a few years ago. Like, that Cincinnati is yet to score a touchdown this season playing Baltimore and now Houston.
Now, I do believe Savage could win a game, especially when Houston's defense is playing like they did. All right? I believe that the trauma of being involved in that horrific storm and the emotion of trying to help people and also get moved back from training camp, all those things are a huge distraction for a locker room. They didn't look well in week number 1. This defense looked like the Houston defense that we are expecting throughout the season. But could Savage win this game? Yes, he could have won this game, but there was one thing that I know would not have happened. When Deshaun Watson made that great run, watch the reception of the other players on the team. The defensive players were running down to the end zone. So the ability to be able to galvanize a team and to be able to win tight games, that right there, I don't think Savage can do.
And props to Savage, though, because he met Watson right on the sideline and congratulated him as well. He wasn't sulking.
Well, that's your job when you're backing me up, is to come meet me after I do good stuff.
Okay.
That's actually a really good point that we didn't talk about, was how the other team rallied, or how the rest of the Texans rallied around him. Moving on, Eagles quarterback Carson Wentz was one of the stars of week 1, throwing for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. So now the Eagles take on the Kansas City Chiefs this weekend, the same Chiefs who kept Tom Brady under wraps in week 1. CC, can Carson Wentz prove he is a star if he beats Kansas City now?
Well, it would be another huge step. Kansas City is an amazing place to go see a football game. If you've never been there, I mean, it is really one of the loudest, most difficult.
Let's go.
The way the fans, crazy people like Nick Wright, they love their Chiefs. I don't think this game will be the one you say, you know something, I believe that Carson Wentz, week number 2, but it is a very hard test for a young quarterback. I believe Carson Wentz has the it factor. I believe he is the face of that franchise, and we will see in year number 2, especially with putting professional receivers. They've made wholesale changes as far as the receivers are concerned, so we will see that. But I believe that the Chiefs will go on to continue what they proved in week number 1. They're one of the best teams in the NFL and has one of the best defenses.
I came into this year agnostic on Carson Wentz, not knowing if it was going to be great, bad, mediocre. After week 1, I got evidence for both sides. I saw him make 3 outstanding plays, avoid the rush, move around, strikes down the field. But I also saw him on plays with a clean pocket throw some really bad balls, including what should have been an easy Nelson Aguilar touchdown that was just flatly missed. So I still don't know. So you would think, against the Chiefs, we're going to figure it out. I think this will be the worst game for the Chiefs defense all year. It's their first game without Eric Berry. That's going to take some time. Eric Berry is the most important member of that defense. We saw Seattle, a team last year, lose their free safety.
Yes.
The other guy who was in contention, Berry and the safety in Seattle, Earl Thomas, are the 2 best free safeties in football. We saw when Seattle lost him, their defense fell apart, was not the same. An amazing stat this morning that I looked up. With Earl Thomas, Seattle gave up a passer rating equivalent to Ryan Fitzpatrick league-wide. Without him, they gave up a passer rating equivalent to Tom Brady league-wide. Shout out to Bill Barnwell for putting that in his article. So that's the impact one of these safeties can make. So that's a long bridge to build to say this. If Wentz looks awesome, I'm going to wonder, is it because my guy Dusty's right and Wentz is great? Or is it because the Chiefs are learning to adjust without Eric Berry?
I believe Wentz will be great. You mentioned the two safeties, Earl Thomas and our boy Eric Berry. I've trained with Eric Berry since he came out of Tennessee.
I had a drink with him once.
I've never had a drink with him.
I'm married to him,
But
so there you go.
This is the point I want to make.
I guess I won.
Earl Thomas is a great player, but Eric Berry is even more valuable. And the reason why, he took Gronk out of the game last week. All right? Earl Thomas covers a lot of ground, erases a lot of mistakes, but he doesn't play man-to-man. Eric Berry plays in the box. They had a 4th down in inches. He's playing middle linebacker, gets through the line of scrimmage, hits the running back in the backfield. So to me, the most valuable safety in the NFL is out for Kansas City. Now, what adjustments? Sutton, the defensive coordinator, tremendous game plan week number 1. What does he do going forward without Berry?
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review, tell us what you think, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern on FS1. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.